Hello and welcome to Color Multimedia Enterprises. My name is Luke, also known as Tianari, and we are going to continue with the HaxeLive editor. This is day 2 of this particular video series, going from start to finish, creating a editor for the underlying repository. And in the last day, what we did was pretty much just introduce the environment, exactly what it is we're doing and how we're going to go about doing it. Now, as you may have saw yesterday, we actually had a probably a bit less code than that, to be fair. But this code is simplifying what we had previously, because what we had was sort of a duplicate in code whereby we had two lines of this exactly as you see it now, except this actually had this, right, this string in place. But I've simplified it down a bit, and we're just storing some string variables there, making sure we replace spaces with no spaces in this example here, and then putting it into these up state and down states in order to get the results. And if we take a look at those results, it should be exactly the same as we saw yesterday, which is click on it, it gets checked, click on it again, it gets unchecked, right? So again, nothing particularly fancy. That is practically just a checkbox. We're not going to be doing much for that particular side of things, but what we will be doing is starting the actual interfaces for this particular project. Now, obviously, we do need to have the ability to create a project, right? We also need interfaces that will allow us to bring up a dialog that allows us to put in some kind of title for our project, where it's going to be created, and go from there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to draw a few things in paint.net in order to get started with that. If I go back to my main, put one there and rebuild it just real quick. I'll just drag this over so that you can see, so that we go back to our live previewing utility instead of our checkbox there. Okay. So, excuse me, what I'm going to do is open up the HaxeLive editor. I'm going to move that over here so that you can see it. This is our checkbox. We're not going to be taking a look at our checkbox anymore. We're going to be taking a look at our dialog. One thing I didn't actually implement into the scene gen, which is something that I actually kind of want to do at some point, is the ability to just put graphics onto the screen. So it's just a case of drawing graphics, rectangles, shapes, that sort of thing. That could be something that I might do in the next day, which would be sort of later in this day, just because it would make life slightly easier as we're creating this. It really just depends. So first of all, what I'd like to do is yeah, I'll just bring up paint.net for the time being. I don't exactly have a list on me. I do kind of roughly know what I'm doing, but it's just sort of play along as I go sort of thing. So I'm sort of going into this blind, I suppose you could say. So what I'm going to do is make sure that I'm going to be opening in the right folder, which I'm not. Okay, 2 seconds. Okay. So when I save, it should just go to that folder. Okay, cool. Right. So the reason I'm doing all of that off screen is so that you don't see what I'm what I've got on my system, because some of it is business related, and obviously for business obligations I can't exactly show you that stuff. So anyway, let's create a new file. It is going to be should I do it the exact same size as this? Probably not. Okay, let's it's just going to be a basic create button. It's not going to be anything fancy. I'm trying to think of the size. Hang on. This is 128, so 150. No, 160 by 32. Right, that'll do. That will do. Right, so this is going to just be a very simple button. I will copy that and paste it here. Actually, no, don't do that just yet. I will do it a different way. Okay, let's go to green. I will make it green, because that stands out. So yeah, let's do that. That looks nice. Yeah, I like that. Okay, and let's make a bit of text here, which will be create. Let's use an open font. Should I use Hind or Open Sans? I think I used Open Sans for that, so probably be a good idea to use that. Keep things consistent. Where is it? Where is it? It's here somewhere. Should be anyway. MNO. Why is it not here? I'm pretty sure I did install it on my computer. It's probably just being stupid. Never mind, I'll use this. Okay, create. Make that a bit larger so that people can see that is in fact the case. Create. That's a bit big actually, thinking about it. Let's move it over here and reduce the canvas size back to the original 128. Yeah, that looks better. What I should have really done is put that text on a different layer. Create a new layer. Right. Let's reduce the canvas size again, because obviously it's all just kind of annoying. And let's put that text on again. Create. There we go. Right, so we finally get something there. Save that. PNG. Create over. Now the reason why I'm doing this as over is because generally, or what I'm thinking of doing is creating some sort of slightly opaque black background for most of the interfaces. One of the reasons why is because you're going to be working on the entirety of the game client, so you'll have the ability to show and hide certain interface elements of the editor, so that you can just see what you're essentially designing. So I want to reduce the saturation and the lightness. Let's make it 70, and then reduce the opacity to, let's say, 190. I'll do. Just about see the create, but of course it is transparent, so what do you know? I'm not entirely sure that's the correct transparency. No. Let's try, let's increase it up to 200. Still not quite the same, but never mind. Never mind. That will do for now. So I'll save that. Make it create. So now, what I'm going to do is I have this here. I am going to create another file inside of info. And obviously that's going to be a JSON file. So it is going to be simple or basic tools. So what you'll have is create, open and save, obviously. So I'll just keep it like that for the time being, and then what I'm going to do is of course give it an instance type, basic tools design. You don't actually need the name, just so that you're aware. If you take a look into here, we've got this name checkbox. It doesn't actually apply to anything, so you can just omit that and it'll work. I say it's needed, but it's not really needed for the root container, if I may be honest. For everything in the contents it is needed, in case you ever wanted to do this alignment stuff. For example, you've got CHB main, okay, I want to align it to that. But apart from that, you don't really need it in the root container. This is going to be a simple button. I am going to get an upstate source, which is going to be image create.png over state source image create over, oops, and I can finally type .png and down state source, which I don't know whether I should revert it back to the create.png or just keep it the same. Or I could do this and instead do this as the Okay, let's do it this way first to start with and take a look at the results. So leave it like that for the time being, and let's go back to config.json file here, and I am going to say basic tools .json. It's not changing, that's not good. Did I miss something out in the live exporter? Possibly. Let me move this over here for the time being. Hang on. Let's take a look into HaxeLive. Again, I really don't want to be doing this, but such is the way of things. If this, we are doing file.getContent. Okay, why is that a problem? Okay. Oh, we're doing assets.getText there. Don't want that. We don't want to do that. Absolutely not. I suppose it doesn't really matter with the config. Because obviously this is the config here, so it doesn't really matter about that. We know the config exists, because that's what we're going to build it with. Is this being opened with file.getContent? These things here. Setup config. Oh yeah, obviously. So yeah, file.getContent there. So it should just work. But it's not for some reason. File is equal to config data.file. which has in fact been changed. So I'm not entirely sure why it hasn't changed yet. Still seeing that. That is so weird. It is spelt right, so I'm not entirely sure what's going on. Okay, it might just be the case of opening and closing. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what's going on there. Yeah, that doesn't feel right. That. I mean, this bit's fine. This bit's fine, but not the other bit. Okay. Okay, fine. Okay. So, what I'm going to do... Yeah, I'm not entirely sure why you can't change basic tools, change it around and stuff like that and have it just immediately take effect. I'm going to have to look into that a bit later. But for the time being, I think I'll go back to paint.net and make it better again. Well, I say that. So instead of doing that, what I'm going to do is saturation. Instead, make the saturation like that. Yeah, that probably makes a bit more sense. Let's be fair here. So let's do a create down here. Make that PNG like that, and make this down as well. So let's take a look at the results. Yeah, that's good. I like that better than what it was previously. Okay, cool. Now I don't actually now I have a save, but I don't actually have a open. So what I'm going to do, normally you would have just create or open first, and then you would have a save, right, and possibly a close button. So it could be something that we could do. Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that, shall we? So let's go back into here. I am going to create another one, which is going to be 128 by 32. So do open. This time it's going to be orange, let's see. If you don't like the colours, let me know in the comment section below this video. Okay, let's do open like that. Okay, that's fine. Save as. This is going to be save over. Oh, oops. Meant open. Over. Then what I want to do is adjust the saturation to what we had before, which is that, which is going to be open down. Very simple, not too complicated. And then we will adjust it once again and remove the saturation. And put it down to, let's say, 70. Use the opacity to 200. And then we're just going to make that open. Like that. Might be wondering, okay, it might be better that we use some kind of theme. For now, it's just a case of testing. So we don't... I could implement a theme if I wanted to, but right now I'm not particularly... this is all... It's just going to be used for the same button, so I don't really need to use a theme. I'm not going to be using it for anything else. In fact, let's just copy and paste this. It's just easier. So I'll make this open. Oh, we're also going to have to put names here as well. Again, this is important if you want to make sure that it all works properly, and of course when we come to export it as well. So this is going to be create, like that. The name for open. Open, I felt sure. Let's make it btn open and btn create, so that we know that is in fact what it is. It is in fact a button. And I am going to put a line here. That is going to be an object, and I am going to align to btn create. Btn create, like that. Alignment, that is going to be 2, I believe, which is right. And I am going to make the padding 0. There we go. So now, oh, I forgot to make these open. That's funny. Open. There we go. So this is open. We can now do that. This is create. We can do that. Cool. I like that. That's cool. That's all cool. So now what I'd like to do is be able to obviously create and open things. Now let's export that and put it into basic tools design. Export successful. So let's take a look at that. Oh, probably want to keep that open for the time being. If we go into our scenes, we take a look. Oh, I forgot to make it a .hx. Idiot. Oh, that's one thing that is a slight bug with the link file, which is the fact that it doesn't automatically use the extension. But anyway, so we've got all this. This all looks good, so that's fine. So we're using all of this stuff, which is as expected. Cool. All right. I'm drinking coffee, in case you were wondering. So yeah, that's basic tools design, and those basic tools will give us the ability to create, obviously, projects and open projects. So now that we've got that, now what I want to do is be able to actually use a create dialog, so that we can in fact create a file. Now with this open, all I'm really going to do, I'm going to close this for the time being. All I'm really going to do is make it so that when we click on the open, we just open up a dialog that allows us to open a file, which is obviously going to be a JSON file, probably containing a config. So what I'm going to do is create another class called basic tools. I am going to extend basic tools design. I'm going to call super here, and in here what I am going to do is say btn event listener. That is going to be a mouse event listener. I'm also going to import the link SDL dialogues even, so I am going to use dialogues there, and when I click on this button I want it to do something, and what I'm going to do is do dialogues dot open. That's something that I implemented myself, message, so that you can bring up a message. This only works on the Windows platform at the moment. I haven't implemented it for Linux or Mac yet, but it does work on Windows for the time being. But that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for open. So the title is going to be, what's it going to be? It's going to be open project, something like that, right? And then I am going to make an array of things. That is going to be, so I'm going to have an ext, which is going to be JSON, and then I am going to have a desk, which is going to be config file, and that will allow us to find a config file that is appropriate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check to see if that result brings back null or not, because if it brings back null, we don't want to do anything with it. And once we've checked that, and we do in fact receive something back that's useful, we then want to make sure that we fix a few things. Now, what I did have in the original project is a thing called file system extender, which I'm actually going to copy over into this because it is rather useful. And what this does is, I'll just get rid of that for the time being. What it does is we get the root directory. So what we're going to do is we're going to normalize the path, which is all it's going to do is basically change any backslashes to forward slashes, right? That's all that's going to do. And then what we're going to do is check to see if the end of the extension, if the end of the string contains an extension, because if it does, then we want to simply get the folder that that file is in. Otherwise, what we're going to do is first remove the trailing slashes, if there is any trailing slashes, on the result, and we're also going to get the substring, which would get us the folder of the parent that we're looking at. So that's what getRootDeer is doing. So we want to do that. So let's do file system extender getRootDeer, and I am going to put in result here like that. And if dir is not equal to empty like that, then we can actually do something with that file. So it is likely that it is in fact a file that we're opening. We want to make sure that the folder exists, so that's the whole the point of this is to check to see if the root directory exists, because for some reason, even though it's not really necessary to check it, it's still best to check it just in case for whatever reason someone copies and pastes in a file location into their open dialog, and if that directory doesn't actually exist, at least still check it anyway, right? Just to be on the safe side. So we're going to check to see if that exists, and if it does, we are going to read that file. And let me just check something here. So what I'm going to do is, we have this live function here, which does all this config file and JSON and stuff like that. We're going to sort of remove it, but not remove it, if that makes sense. So, what's the best way to do this? So essentially the idea is you click on the open file, a dialog appears. You click on the JSON file, and then once you've clicked on that JSON file, it exists, we parse it. What we then do is we tell the live previewing client to basically say, okay, we want to open this file. So that's essentially literally all we're going to do. What I'm thinking of doing is creating some form of template inside of the HaxeLive editor, which will be built and used instead, right? So what I'm going to do is instead use a test client. Alternatively, what I could just do is go into, not here actually, I could go into include.xml, and if I just edit that, if I have a section which says if we're using live client, maybe, then what we could do is include that file. So we'll just say assets path is equal to tests simple, right? And that would be the live previewing client instead of itself, right? If that makes sense. So at the moment, what we have currently, if we take a look at Flash Develop, we have in main.hx this conditional, which is basically 1 or 0. If we got rid of that and said, okay, I actually want to use a completely different client, I want to build my live previewing in a completely different window, okay, we'll do that. And that is essentially what we're going to do in this case. So I'm probably going to create another file in here, which is going to be a live client, which is going to do the live previewing itself, right? So we will import live from HaxeLive, and we're going to use that instead of the way that we're currently doing it, right? So in here, I'm going to say private var client. This is going to be the process that we're referencing, I suppose you could say. So I'll make that live. Let me just, because what you can do is execute a process, which is in here. So you can, where is it? Where is it? Should be here somewhere. It is here, isn't it? Oh yeah, command. So you can execute a command, and that is exactly what we're going to do. Okay. So what we would do is we would build it, we would execute that command, and then all we would do with this live client is we would read any system errors and standard outputs and retrieve it back to the editor itself so that we can do anything that we want to do. So what we're going to do is in here, we're going to get a path to the client. So I'll just make this client path, why not? So that's going to be a string. In fact, what would be even better is just doing this. Alternatively, I could just get rid of it like that. And make that string as well. So we got this client path. When we set the client path, we are going to, well, we don't really want to set it, to be honest. We just want to get it. So we'll make that null. So when we create the live client, we want to pass in a variable, which is going to be the path to the client that we're going to initiate. we're going to make the client path set that, and then what we want, first of all, what we probably want to do is actually make it so that we can check to see if the file exists first. Probably be a good idea. So let's import file. Sys.io. Why is it doing that for? Stop it. io.file. File. Oh, of course. It's file system, not file. Like that. Make sure it works. File system exists. So we check to see if that path exists first. And then we do this. What we also want to do is make sure that we know where the bin path is. Well, no, actually, this will be the path to the executable. That will be the path to the executable. Let's not make things too complicated. So what I'm going to do is I am going to set current working directory to whatever the root directory of that path is, right? And then I'm going to execute that path, right? Whatever that is. So it could be HaxeLive for all we know. So if we go back into File System Extender and add that functionality in, public static function get file, perhaps. Excuse me. Right. So we want to get the file from a path. Going to be very, very simple. It's not going to be too complicated. So we want to check to see if it does in fact have a file extension, because if it doesn't, then obviously it isn't a file. Probably want to normalize the path as well. Let's normalize it first. Oops. Like that. When I can finally type, Jesus Christ. So if file extension dot match, no match, like that, I'm going to pass in that result, that normalized result. Again, when I can type, what is wrong with me today? And then what I'm going to do is simply return result dot substring, and all I'm going to do is just result dot last index of. That's going to be that plus 1, so that we don't include the forward slash. Alright, that's all we're going to do. That will get the file that we're looking for from a path. So then it's just a case of sys dot command, and then we execute it. So that'll be file system extender get file path. Right, very simple to do, and that will execute the application, and we should be able to get some kind of a way to get the standard input and output of that. So let's just take a look at the standard input and output of this. Now obviously this is getting the process of our current process. So when we execute this process, we will be able to see the standard input and output and error of this particular process, but we want to get the standard error input and output of another process. How do we do that? Let's find out. Because I haven't actually done this before. Environment. Don't want that. Probably not in here. Can we get the process of something? I think we can. Oh! So instead of using process, instead of doing that, we'll just use process instead. So we'll use that. So proc is equal to new process, which will be that, right? And then we can read the standard error input and output of that process. Cool. Okay, so when we create that proc, we can then read it. So let's go and get that. So what I'm going to do is clients output. We're not going to have a set. We're just going to get, and that is going to be a standard input, which is something, well, output really. Output, output like that. Again, this is going to be output like that. And instead of doing all of that, what I'm going to do is put in client, which is going to be a process. And I am going to do standard output, which should be hex. Oh, it's an input. Interesting. Huh. Is that right? That's a standard output, and yet it's defined as an input. That's weird. Apparently it's an input. Like that. Huh. That's interesting. So instead of doing that, we'll just client like that instead. Okay. So we get the fact that it exists, we create that process, and then we obviously execute it. I'm assuming that's what the new process does anyway. We'll test this in a minute anyway, so that we know what we're doing. So we now want a client error, which is apparently an output. Oh no, it's an input, sorry. Again, we're not going to be using that. We are not going to make that null again, and we are going to make it standard error, which is for some reason an input. And then last but by no means least, we got the client input, which is an output. Again, I suppose it does make sense to a certain extent, because yeah, I'm not I'm not entirely sure what's going on there, actually, to be honest. Why would you get the input and set stuff within the output? Makes no sense. But anyway, I'm not going to argue with it. I'm sure the people at Hakes know what they're doing. Otherwise it wouldn't work. Okay, so this is going to be output. Wait, no. What are we doing? Don't need that. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. Right. Get rid of this. Don't need that. Standard input. Right. Oops. I wasn't meant to do that. Okay. So we've got our client input, we've got our client error, and we've got our client output. So what we will do is, oh, that needs to be output. So what we will do is we will create the client. We know that the client exists, therefore we will be able to get it. We need to get rid of that as well because obviously that doesn't exist. So yeah, obviously this is all system, so it would only work on system targets. So when we go into here, we are going to have some kind of private static function somewhere, probably in here, right? Which is going to have our live client. So instead of using this, actually, let's do an if live client. So when we go into here, we are going to have a live client, which is going to be our live client here. We're going to initialize that, and we want the path to whatever we're getting from the project XML here. So we know that inside simple, so if I just go into here, we know we've got our simple, which is here. We haven't actually built that yet. So what we could do is we could go into that folder and we could execute a command that basically builds this particular project here, right? Now this is going to be a slightly different, possibly on Linux and Mac, because I believe there's a thing called the sudo command. Now, depending on whether or not we're building in a protected directory on that system, obviously we don't know that yet. We don't actually know if we are building in a protected client. So to be on the safe side, what we would probably do is use the sudo command. And then we would request that the person who's activating the live client, they would use a password to allow it to build, right, in that protected folder. Why you would put it in a protected folder, I don't know. But just to be on the safe side, that's what we would do. So we know that when we build it, we're going to get back our tests, which is going to be simple, and we're going to have a bin folder there, and we would probably have something like HaxeLive, depending on what target we're using. So we need to know what target we're using. So what I'm going to do is var target is equal to nothing for now. Do that. Right. So if we're on Windows, then we're going to say target is equal to, what am I doing? Windows, like that. Else, why is my typing skill so terrible today? In here, I'm going to put in Linux 64 because that is the default. And then else if Mac target, again, it's Mac 64. Like that. Then we're going to end. And then instead, I'll make it single quotes that I can do the string interpolations trick, which will be target followed by a space, slash even, and then followed by the application that we're looking for, which in this case would be HaxeLive. Now, obviously, depending on the extension, we don't need to use the extension, I suppose. On Linux, there's no extension. On the Mac, there's the extension app, which is what OpenFL will do, will build. And on Windows, it's going to be exe. I think for the yeah, I don't think we need it, because if we go back into live clients, where is it? Here. We're creating a new process. We might actually need it. We might need it. Okay, we'll use the we'll make an extension. So ext is equal to that. Ext is going to be .exe, and Mac ext is equal to .app, like that. And again, we are going to get app extension. Again. $extension. So we got the target, we got the extension, and then we create that client. Right. Now, we don't know if that's been built yet, so what we're going to do instead is we are going to, well, build it. So what I'm going to say is sys.command. I'm going to say, depending on what target we're using, again, will depend on whether or not we're going to use sudo. So I'm going to have a admin, which is going to be empty here. Actually, I could just make it sudo in Windows. I'll just make it empty, I suppose, like that. And what we're going to do is pass in admin, followed by HaxeLive, run OpenFL, build project.xml, and then whatever our target is. So that's the command that we want to execute, and obviously we want to make sure that the current working directory is changed accordingly as well. So again, we're going to do file system get root dir, followed by whatever the path is. Well, it would be in tests. Simple. Actually, no, we don't need to do that. Just pass in tests. Simple. It'll know. It'll know. So we'll use that. That'll point to our live client. So what I'm going to do is simply test it, see if it works. So let's see. I think that's everything.